Welcome to Kingdomize, the podcast, where we discuss how to see our lives and our world through a kingdom lens, how to infuse kingdom culture into our families, our workplaces, and our cities, as we all participate in the dream of Jesus to see his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Welcome back to Kingdomize Global, the podcast, and we are going to learn so much today about leadership. And by the end of it, we're just going to be filled with pride and excitement. And oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. That's another. We're actually talking about humility today. So it won't be the pride and excitement. It'll be humility. And I'm here with my good friend Bruce Mann, and he is our kingdom leadership guru. And we've been on a journey over the last few weeks about what kingdom leadership really is, what it isn't, how it looks, how it affects us and others. And we're just going to go a little deeper on that today with Bruce Mann. Bruce, how are you today?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Excellent. And I probably messed your life up a bit when I started talking about pride and excitement and all that. But sometimes I do that just to see how people respond. So
just to see the real response. Well, I'll try to respond appropriately with humility.
You were so good. You were so good. So talk to us about. Let's just set this up. Let's set up the talk for today. What's the deal with humility? Why is it so important? How is it connected to where we've been going and where we've been?
Well, I would title this session "The Power of Humility," which may seem like a bit of an oxymoron to some people because we often view the idea of humility as stepping back, taking a lower place, not being very, very prominent in, and yet it's actually a virtue that is incredibly powerful, and we're going to hopefully discover that today. And if I can reflect back on the last couple of sessions, just to quickly kind of put us in a context for today. The first session we're talking about having our worldview be a restorative relational worldview rather than a legal moral one, right? So we're not throwing out the law, the legal moral. There's things that are right and there are things that are wrong, for sure. But our default is to bring restoration and to bring relationship. Right. And then we talked about, to do that, I need to express authentic spirituality, right? Remember, we're a spiritual being on a human journey, not a human being on a spiritual journey. And we talked about vision, voice, and values. Vision being God's vision, not ours. We have a purpose. Our purpose is to fill in some part of God's vision of restoration and redemption and transformation of his creation, of which we're part of. We have vision. We hear God's voice. He leads us. He guides us. And we live out of kingdom values that are unchanging. But to do that effectively, because we never do it perfectly because we're not perfect.
Right.
We actually need to introduce into that dynamic of living out of vision, living with God's vision in mind, out of hearing his voice and out of those unchanging values. We need to introduce this idea of humility. Because it's actually, I sometimes will describe it as sort of the grease that lubricates the gears of these things, because we don't get it right all the time.
Right.
And we don't always, make the right choices. We sometimes just make a poor choice, or we kind of lose it, or whatever. We need something that actually helps bring some. Again, lubrication, gear, if you can think of these gears meshing. And so that's why I think this is actually a really, really important talk for us to look at. And, so we're going to explore that and how it impacts both the people we are leading, how it impacts us, and why is it so powerful? Why is it so significant and important?
Love it. The power of humility. I love that title. I love where you're going. So we should just jump in. Let's talk about the impact of humility on others then. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Sure. So I use this definition for humility and it's very simple. I'll hopefully be able to describe it or give you some understanding, but I just simply use the idea of self-forgetfulness. Self-forgetfulness, meaning that at its very root, and this is, to me, this is one of the key virtues of God's kingdom, is it's not about me. In that yes, God provides us with wonderful blessings. Jesus died for me on the cross. He rose again. I participate in that redemptive work, but I participate in the same way that I'm now partnering with Jesus. He's recruited me to be part of his kingdom. And so I have to not just simply receive from God, but I need to actually participate with God, participate with Jesus in this redemptive process. And to do that, the very essence of that is I have to do it with a forgetfulness about my own gratification. I have needs, yes, and there are things that I do to bring health, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But this idea of self-forgetfulness really means that I enter into my relationships, and particularly when we're talking about leadership, for the good of others. And it's not about living with a sense of insignificance, my own insignificance. It's actually just living with a great awareness of the significance of others, the importance of others. And that in order to be like Jesus, again, we'll talk about this in a moment, that needs to be my default.
So when you're saying this, I don't know if I think I'm in the right crowd here, and you'll remember this. But the old song we used to sing years ago, "Jesus and others and you, what a wonderful way to spell joy." Like it's almost that, right? It's that getting the order right. It's not like we're forgetting about ourselves, but we are, in essence, to be able to see the right order. Is that right?
Yeah. Jesus tried to express this to us in a few different ways. The idea of dying to self, we use that expression, that the seed dies in order to live.
Right.
There's this paradox, this oxymoron almost, that in order to live, I have to die.
Yeah.
And obviously our greatest example of that is Jesus himself. And so it's actually it's an intentional diminishing of my own personal wants and needs and will in order to move into and participate in God's wants and needs and will.
Yeah.
But by doing that, I find life. I find my true self.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's this dying to self, this dying in order to live, which unfortunately hasn't been a big emphasis in the world around us.
Yeah. Especially like everything is about my truth and my way. Like this is so countercultural. It's fantastic. Right?
I saw a book today, and I don't even remember. I was somewhere. I think I was at our church, and there was a shelf full of books, and one of the books was "Don't Be True to Yourself." If the book title was "Don't Be True to Yourself," right? Because that's an expression we use all. Be true to yourself. Be true to your needs. Be true to who you are. I get the message in that, but actually be true to the calling on your life, to live out your purpose, to live out your life, participating with God in the redemptive process for others.
And again, the context that we're talking in is a leadership context, right? So this brings even a greater dimension of the need for this, to understand that leadership ability comes from God. We're leading others. So that piece is there, right? The leadership component makes it even stronger.
Yeah. And this, I mean, we're talking in spiritual terms, as we should, but this actually is, there's this thing called emotional reciprocity. Big fancy title. What it means is that people are impelled, not propelled, but impelled to evoke in you the emotions that you evoke in them. Right? So if I do something to anger you, there's something in us that wants to make me angry as well, right? If I bring,
I want to repay the favor.
Yeah. we're just wired that way.
Yeah, I get it.
So humility, when you function in humility, meaning you're putting others first above your own, your own wants and needs. Again, not that your wants and needs aren't valid. They're just, your default is to say, how do I help others first? You evoke in them an emotional response that helps them engage and helps you to process, right? So there's a famous book, many people will be aware of it, called Good to Great, Jim Collins, very famous leadership book. And he's defined this kind of leader, a level 5 leader. And he goes through this series of different types of leaders, charismatic leaders, that type of thing. But the level 5 leader, he defines as this paradoxical combination of professional will and personal humility. Paradoxical combination. And really, that's this essence of leading. This is very practical in many ways. That what he determined in his research was that the companies that were led by leaders who had professional will, they got up in the morning with something to do and something to achieve, but they functioned with a high degree of personal humility, groundedness, very, very basic, very simple. This is what the definition of the word. These companies were the ones that had the greatest enduring success, and their leadership had a legacy that lasted beyond themselves.
Yeah.
And so this idea of people responding to leaders who are humble, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means, is very practical. But the reality is, it's not a tactic; it's a virtue. It's something we actually possess. It's not just an action, a tactic we use to kind of achieve something.
Yeah.
So it impacts others powerfully.
Yeah, that's so good. So, Bruce, did you want to talk about the meaning of the word at this point then? Well,
I did a bit of research because words, we use the word humble all the time. He's humble, personal humility. So I thought, man, we use this word all the time. What's its root? Where did it come from? And it comes from the root word humus. Now, it could be hummus. We talked about that. I love hummus on pita bread. But humus is just the soil, right? It's the topsoil.
It's dirt.
It's dirt. It's the earth. It's basic. It's ground level.
Right.
And so I got thinking about that. And so the definition of the word that we use in English called humility is really just about being grounded. It's about being basic. Now think about this in the kingdom context. When I put it through that filter, it's about functioning from the essence of God's kingdom, the nature of it, the ethos of it. And the ethos of it is others. Yeah. Jesus is our great example. We see that in Philippians 2, that he although he was God, he took himself to the lowest place in order to be elevated. But that was the end result. He had to lower himself and take on the form of a servant, something completely foreign to the essence of who he was, in order to achieve for us something we could never achieve on our own. And then he calls us to participate in that same spirit.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And so this is so foundation, it's so ground level. It's the soil of the kingdom, if we can use that expression.
That's such an important piece for us. Right?
I thought it was an interesting definition. It's the soil that the good things of the kingdom grow in.
No, really good. Really good. So this is really good. So that has to do with the humility on others, the impact on others. Let's go to the impact on me. Like, I want to know how it affects me. Yeah. There's a good, humble statement, right? How does this affect me?
Well, this is where it gets tricky, right? This is where I moved from. I was talking about it before. It's not a tactic. hey, I'm going to be I'm going to be humble so that I'm going to have all these great results. Well, that's a tactical understanding of humility. It's not coming out of us in naturally because our default is, and this is the ongoing transformational process that we go through to die to self, right? I mean, I remember growing up and hearing many times, the trouble with a human, sacrifice or a live sacrifice that keeps crawling off the altar, right? And
Yeah,
so, I mean, you probably heard those many times as a teenager, but it's really true. This idea of dying to self may be just an idea. It may be an eternal process. It
yeah,
may not just be finished the day Jesus calls us to home or whatever, however we understand that. It may be something that happens for eternity, and it may bring us the greatest joys ultimately.
yeah,
And so, but here's the struggle in this. If I only understand humility in the sense of putting others first, I can, in as a result of that, basically exhaust my own personal capacity, right? So it's humility isn't just saying I'm worthless, I have no value, I just serve, that's all I do. If I'm leading people, and I want to lead with humility, I actually have to invest in myself. And this is kind of the paradox. In order to give something to others, I have to have something in me to give. And so I don't invest in myself for my own personal gratification. I take time to invest in myself, and that can be physical, that can be spiritual, it can be relational. I invest in myself in order that I have something in the tank to give to others. And I don't do it with any guilt. I do it because it's the right thing to do. It positions me to be able to serve God and to serve others well. And I have to be intentional about it. And so, humility in this sense, how does it impact me? Well, it means that I can, without any guilt and without any sense of, I'm being selfish, I can invest in myself. And that, again, that comes in many different ways, spiritual, physical, relational. I have to invest and do it understanding that that's how I am actually able to put others first.
yeah, yeah. And Bruce, would it be right to take that even farther in the sense of, because of what God has invested in me, because there's a reason and purpose for why I'm here to invest in others, that I actually should, like, as part of my lifestyle, as part of honoring God, and even out of humility, I want to invest in myself to be the best. Is that a fair uh, part of the puzzle for this?
Yeah, yeah. And so I come back to this idea of the groundedness, the
Yeah,
soil. I'm also in the soil,
yeah,
right? And I need to be able to grow. I need to learn. I need new revelation. And yeah, so I would say definitely it's it's a transformational process that we participate in. And I'm going to share a quote in a few minutes when we get to the next part and talking about why humility is so powerful. But it's the kingdom dynamic, right? And that's where I think we begin to find the greatest joy in life.
So Bruce, before we recorded today, you were telling me a story about mirrors and windows, and I didn't catch it at all. So why don't you share it with others, and
Yeah.
maybe I'll catch it the second time around.
Okay. Well, again, I'll reference back to the Jim Collins book, Good to Great.
Yeah, yeah,
He attempts to describe what uh, a level 5 leader does, how they function. And he uses an illustration that may be helpful for us. And it's the window and door illustration. And he talks about level 5 leaders who, when something's going right in their business, in their whatever they're doing, whatever their organization, their business is doing, they go to the window and they look out the window and they see the people they're leading and they see the things that are happening, and they see that they're the ones who are making it happen. They
got it.
the gratitude and the accolades go to the team, right? when something's going wrong, your default response to that isn't to go to the window and look at everyone and say, what's wrong with you people? You go to the mirror.
Got it.
And you look and you say, okay, what's my part in this? How do I own my part in this? And how do I understand that so that I can respond to others in an appropriate way that builds kingdom in them and in whatever we happen to be, we're pursuing, rather than just blaming and trying to vindicate myself. Again, Jesus is always our greatest example. He never vindicates himself. He never takes time to sort of say, hey, I'm right because of this and this. And he just goes about his business in great confidence and great humility, without having to waste a lot of time and energy justifying himself and his actions.
Yeah, and at the most inopportune times. He didn't do it when Satan tempted him. He didn't do it when they were about to crucify him. He didn't feel like he had to defend himself at all. It was very remarkable, really.
And I think I referenced this in one of our other episodes. The only time he responds in those settings is when Satan is either trying to thwart or warp his understanding of who God is, or when someone's trying to change his identity or somehow not validate who he is. So again, in front of Pilate says, "Are you a king?" Well, he says, "Yes, I am."
Yeah,
and he doesn't back away. But that's humility, right?
Yeah, really.
He knew who he was. Really, he had no need to justify himself, but didn't also deny it. So
yeah, that's really good. So we've got how humility affects others. We've got the impact on ourselves. Let's wrap up then with the last point. Let's talk about the power of humility. Why is it so powerful?
Sure. Well, I think humility is incredibly attractive to people. I mean, nobody likes someone who's arrogant. Nobody likes someone who is entitled. Nobody likes someone who's just commanding control. There's something very attractive about someone who functions with tremendous confidence in who they are, but without any need to announce it, any need to validate it. They're just comfortable in who they are, and they recognize they're seeking the other's good first, and so there's validation in that. But the other thing that this really does, and we'll dive deeper into this as we move through the different lessons, I would say humility is the doorway to true stewardship. If I'm an owner, it's hard for me to function with tremendous humility. If I'm a steward, it's done out of a spirit of humility, of understanding who I am and who the real owner is, who the real the real master is. And it's this paradox in many ways, because it's when I release things that I actually gain more influence. It's not because when I clutch and grab, it's when I build others, when I invest in others, when it's incredibly powerful. And again, we see Jesus, who had unbelievable influence on other people, made some angry, made some weep. But there wasn't. What it was hard to do was dismiss him. And so we see it being incredibly powerful. And it's really, there's this two. I think I may have mentioned this in some of the other episodes, but I love this idea though, that there's two ways to be close to Jesus, two ways to be close to God. One is in proximity, meaning I'm standing beside him.
Yeah.
And I may hear his voice. I may even be able to touch him, but it doesn't make me like him. Right. The other way to be close to Jesus is in likeness. And functioning with humility is that gateway to being like Jesus, in likeness. And that leads me to being close to him in his mission, and understanding his heart and being able to participate with him. As I grow in likeness, I'm better able to participate in his mission. It's when I'm not growing in likeness that there begins to be challenges because I have my own agenda. And so this idea of self-forgetfulness. It's not about, my identity, my purpose, my vision, all these things. It's actually about how do I engage in such a way that I grow in Christ-likeness in order that I can participate at the highest level possible in his plan and purpose for other people's lives. And actually use my relationship, not just for my own benefit, but to participate, because that's the highest level of, in my mind, that's the highest level of intimacy I can have with Jesus, is to partner with him in his mission to the highest degree possible.
Yeah.
I'll share a quote that I love, and I wish we had time to for me, I'm telling you what works for me, so hopefully this works for others. But one of my favorite books by C.S. Lewis is called The Problem of Pain, and there's a chapter at the end where he talks about why we exist. Why did God create us? Why did he create more than one of us? There are billions of us, humans.
Yeah.
And he talks about each one's unique role in understanding some unique aspect of who God is. But in that chapter, he uses a little illustration. I'm not sure if he's getting this from somewhere, if this is his own words, but he talks about selfhood, and he says the golden apple of selfhood thrown among the false gods became an apple of discord because everyone scrambled for it. This idea of me, myself, and I. They didn't know the first rule of the holy game, which was that every player must by all means touch the ball and immediately pass it on. To be found with it in your hands is a fault. To cling to it is death. But when it flies to and fro among the players, too swift for the eye to follow, and the great master himself, Jesus, leads in the revelry, giving himself eternally to his creatures in the generation and back to himself in the sacrifice of the word, then indeed the eternal dance makes heaven drowsy with its harmony. Flowery words, but he's talking about this holy game. He uses this expression of, giving ourselves to each other, seeking each other's best good, putting others first, dying to self in order to live and participate in this holy game. And I love that expression because it means it puts humility, takes it away from this idea of I'm nothing, I'm just kind of this lowly guy. And it allows me to participate, understanding my incredible value to God. And also because of that, I understand the incredible value of other beings, other people, and why it's so important for me to put them and consider their best good as my initial response to them. So.
Excellent. Well, I didn't think we'd get out today without a C.S. Lewis quote from you, and you
probably not.
You did let me down, and you gave me the holy hot potato game as well.
Yeah.
So the hot potato humility, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So good. So, well, we're basically at the end here. It's been so good today, Bruce. Kind of wrap this up. Bring us to a close of how do I get humility? What's the how-to?
Well, here's the thing. This may be one of the most difficult things to put into some sort of tactical how-to, right? And that's because the essence of humility isn't tactical. I'm not humble in order to impress people. I'm not humble in order to do stuff. It needs to come out. It needs to be naturally come out of me as I grow in my awareness of who I am, who God is, and who others are. So it's not just a process. So it really is this, this almost lifelong, as I said, maybe eternal process of dying to self and being able to put others first, not in some sort of self, damaging way, but just because we're in awe of the value of that person before God. And it really is the heavy lifting of kingdom transformation. So I don't have a how-to, but I do think that, and again, using Jesus, he invested in himself. He went away and spent time thinking and praying. He was intentional about how he engaged with people. Sometimes he walked away. Sometimes he leaned in. And so I think this is more of it's both a science and an art. We kind of know what humility is now, but it's not like you just, hey, I'm going to be humble today, right?
Yeah.
Look at me, how good I'm doing. It's more about growing in becoming so aware of the value of others that we begin to, naturally just respond to them because of that. And so I don't have a how-to in this instance, but I do have an encouragement for people to continue to deeply think about how they're engaging with those around them. Is it out of fear? Is it out of self-gratification? Is it to achieve an end at all costs? Or am I actually processing my leadership role in such a way that I'm also as I'm pursuing the goals of the leadership, I'm considering the fact that the primary goal is people, growing people and helping them come along with me, and investing in them. So difficult one, but I hope that people are intrigued enough to look inside and begin to just process how they're engaging with the people around them.
Yeah, for sure. That's really good. And I expected that you would go to Philippians 2 today, because that's and it's so perfect, right? It's so perfect for this, because Jesus could have been proud, but he exemplified you for. If anyone had the right to be proud, it would have been Jesus. But he shows us through his life, and then Paul says, "Let your mind be like Christ." So that's so good. So many good things to grab onto, and only the third of 10 lessons, Bruce. How great. We are going to be like world changers. We are going to be great leaders. There's a chance when we're done this, we might be kingdomizers.
Maybe, hopefully.
Which I think is the goal. So thank you, Bruce, for sharing your wisdom again. So fantastic. And thank you all for listening today to Kingdomize, a podcast. We're glad you're here. Hey, stay connected to us on Facebook, all the other social medias. You can find us all there. And I can't say too many because that would go against the lesson today. So just find us out there somewhere. We'll be humbly sitting somewhere on the internet for you to come by. So
ready to engage.
So you have a great week. We'll see you next week on Kingdomize, the podcast.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today on Kingdomize, the podcast. Let's keep the discussion going throughout the week on our socials or on our website, kingdomizeglobal.com. Contact us today to see how we can walk together to see more of God's kingdom in your city as it is in heaven.